Welcome to Wembley Stadium. We're here in the changing room and we have just been at the Tyson Fury versus Dillian Whyte press conference. Dillian Whyte, of course, not turning up, but Tyson very much was there in excellent form. I'm joined by Carl Frampton, Tommy Fury, David Price and Tris Dixon. Let's go straight on to that fight. We're going to talk about the heavyweight division a bit today, but let's start with that fight, given as we are here at the presser. Tris, a lot of new faces in that press conference room. It says a lot about the size of the fight, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, they're talking about maybe 100,000 people being here on fight night as well. And I think you know, it's not just an all British derby. You're looking at a fight between two of the best heavyweights in the world. So there's a lot to be excited about. We just hope that obviously Dillian Whyte can be and will be part of the build-up, and so he could pull his weight, because you know you've got two fantastic characters in there, and it'd be great to see them playing off against each other in the build-up. And obviously, who gets the advantage with the mind games? You know, it's always a big part of Tyson's arsenal, and for Dillian as well. So, and it's great exposure for Dillian if he gets involved. So, fingers crossed we get a brilliant build-up and a great fight.
Carl, would you ever not turn up to a press conference?
I don't think so, no. And I think Tris has hit the nail on the head there. I think although the diehards will say it's all really about the fight, but I enjoy a good build-up as well. And Tyson being Tyson, huge character, as is Dillian Whyte, another huge character. I was expecting like fireworks today and really excited about coming here, and obviously it's still great that Tyson's able to do it and he handled it really well on stage himself, but it would be nice to have Dillian Whyte involved at some point.
I think people always venture into the territory where they talk about, oh, there's mind games being played, but it seems like I can't decide personally whether it is a mind game situation or genuinely a financial one. Do you think it could be anything to do with the mind games?
It can't possibly a financial situation, because there's enough money on the table to warrant them coming to the press conference. You can't need any more money possibly to turn up. I just think it's a bit of an act of defiance from Dillian Whyte, but I don't really get why he's waited this long to get to this point. You know, it's been a long slog for Dillian Whyte to get this point. I think he's doing himself an injustice by not experiencing the entire build-up to a heavyweight world title fight at Wembley Stadium. I think he's doing himself a bit of an injustice, but only he knows why he's not doing it. You know, I think he should be drinking it all in. You know, it could be a once-in-a-lifetime experience for Dillian Whyte. He's waited this long, he may as well take the lot of it on board.
So obviously you know Tyson better than any of us. When he found out that there was going to be no Dillian Whyte at this press conference, do you think it changed anything in his mind? Because we know that he likes to get involved, and not just as a mind games thing, but he's a showman, and it takes two to tango, doesn't it? And it's like Carl was saying, he was excited about the thought of the fireworks. Do you think it affected Tyson at all, thinking about the press conference just being him?
No, definitely not. You know, we've all said in the build-up to this fight, you know, normally it takes two to tango, but in this case, I really don't think it does. I mean, I think the 100,000 people that are going to be there on April 23rd, they're all coming to see Tyson. They're all coming to see the King come home. You know, how many people's really going to be there to see Dillian Whyte fight? I mean, it's not about Dillian Whyte, this fight. It's the Tyson Fury Roadshow, him coming home. That is what this is about. This is what the 100,000 people is about. You know, no one's coming to see Dillian Whyte, so really him turning up today, it hasn't bothered us. He's trying to play mind games with the best person in the world to play mind games with. But you can't get inside Tyson's head. There's no getting inside his head. Tyson started laughing when he found out it wasn't coming. Like, he's not interested because it's his show. So it doesn't matter if he's really here or not in the build-up, because everyone's coming to see Tyson anyway. So, you know, Dillian Whyte, like David said, is just doing injustice for himself. Because like Tyson said at the press conference, when people look back at this in history, there's going to be no photos of him, there's going to be no nothing of him. And it's only him, it's his own doing by not being here, you know, not soaking it all up. So, you know, it's really his decision, is it? But no one's really interested about Dillian Whyte, I don't think.
You must have been a bit disappointed though. You've been to so many of these Tyson Fury press conferences. That is part of the fun, right? It's seeing him, you know, argue with someone. It's seeing him play with someone. It's seeing all that happening. You must have been a bit disappointed as a fan of boxing. I know you're obviously on the Fury team, but you would have liked to see it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a team of 12 of us come down on the train. We filled up a whole carriage, expecting fireworks to go off and expecting it to get a bit tasty today, but we've all sort of just stood around and in the slump mode. You know, we was all revved up on the train coming down here, but again, I truly believe they haven't come down for one reason. You know, they know what we're like, and they know they can't play them normal games that they do with everybody else at a press conference, because we won't just stand around talking. It'd go off, and I do truly believe that's got something to do with it. But at the end of the day, you know, his name doesn't need to be mentioned. Because like Dave said, he's getting heavily paid for it. In my opinion, I don't think he's done an awful lot really to get the type of money that he's getting. You know, and not to turn up to a press conference, I think it's very rude and unprofessional.
I mean, I'll say this, you know, in terms of him not deserving it, Dillian could have sat in his mandatory spot for a long period of time and taken easier fights than the fights he's had. And I think he has been courageous over the last couple of years with the assignments he's had, like Povetkin, like Rivas, like Chisora. He has stayed active at a high level when he could have been having easier mandatories. I think fair dues, right?
The only thing I'd say to that is, you know, we talk about Dillian Whyte and the fights he's had. He's fought Oscar Rivas, all right? He's fought Derek Chisora twice, and I think Derek Chisora beat him in the first one. Tyson beat Derek Chisora when Derek Chisora was fresh, 14-0. What's he really done to get £8 million, you know, and fight at Wembley Stadium sold out? I think he's hit the jackpot, hasn't he? Like, I see what you're saying.
He's been doing good business at the O2, he's built his brand, and he's stayed active at a high level with Joseph Parker and those guys as well. Obviously, he was clinging on against Joseph Parker at the end of that fight. But I think fair play, he sort of sat in his position. He didn't just sit in his position. He stayed active, stayed busy at a good level, built his fan base, and now he's got the payoff, which he's been waiting for. But obviously, that's what I'm saying. He's got the payoff. He's got what he's wanted. It would be nice if he was here and a part of it.
I think it's perfect timing as well for Dillian as far as the size of the fight and the magnitude is that it's just as Tyson Fury's ready to fight again in the UK. You know, it's a perfect storm for Dillian. He could have got a shot if he'd have beaten Povetkin in the first fight, and things might have just, the timing might have been a little bit differently. You know, the time of the year, suits, spring, you can have it outdoors at Wembley. It's all fell into place, but as far as being deserving of the shot, I fought on a couple of Dillian's undercards in that period, and I remember thinking, he's taking risky fights here where he could just sit on it. But that being said, he was headlining pay-per-view on Sky, so he won't have been doing it for shilling. You know, he'll have earned at the same time, putting the rounds in the bank and picking up the experience that he probably didn't get when he was an amateur fighting at top level. He just went straight into the pro game, Dillian. So I think he's played it well. You know, I think he's played it blind at getting to this position, and I do think he's deserving of the shot.
You mentioned it, David, earlier on that you didn't think it was a financial decision, but I think it potentially could be a financial decision. Although he's getting a huge amount of money here, more than he's ever seen before, more than he'll probably ever see again. I think he's potentially maybe just trying to squeeze a little bit more. You know what the rivalries are like, and promoters and different camps and TV networks. You maybe just say, I don't have to be involved in this unless you give me a little bit more money, and that's could be what's going on here.
Yeah, you'd like to think it's fair that if the promotion does, you know, exceeds all expectations, that there'd be more upside for him afterwards if he's putting the work now to try and build the fight. So you know, if you help build it into the immense promotion that it should be, then obviously maybe there should be some upside afterwards, rather than, you know, saying I'm not going to come and play unless you pay me ahead of time. So it could be one of those things where the more he invests in it now, it would help him down the long run as well.
Yeah. Talking about the fight itself, obviously the finances and politics of boxing is something we probably all talk a bit too much about. It does seem to be part of the boxing fandom that people are almost more interested in sometimes. But the fight itself is such an enormous mega fight that so rarely happens, particularly here. It's such a relief as a boxing fan to get a fight of this size here. Whyte, as a fighter, is coming in as the underdog. Fury is the favourite. What kind of chances do you give him, and what are his strengths do you think that he could use to trouble Fury?
Well, I said, Tyson said it himself, he's got a puncher's chance. Really, that's what he's got, and anything can happen in the heavyweight division. Like, they're all big guys and they all can knock each other out, but we've seen Tyson get up off the canvas when it looked like he was knocked out against the biggest punching heavyweight there's probably ever been. Although Dillian Whyte is a big puncher, I think his style is really, really made for Tyson. I don't know what they expect from Tyson's performance. No one expected him to go head first against Wilder, which he did, and he beat him up in the second and third fight. But I think that the style's just made for him. We've seen how he performed against guys like Chisora, who's a similar style to Dillian Whyte. I just think if you're Team Fury, you're kind of, it's a perfect fight for you. It's a marquee fight because it's an all British showdown, but it's like the absolute perfect style for Tyson.
Go on then, Team Fury. Is it a perfect fight?
Definitely, I think. I mean, it's one of them. Apart from a puncher's chance and it being heavyweight boxing, you know, that's all I can really say about this fight. I mean, for me, I said this to my dad all week long. I said, all this fight it's a massive homecoming for Tyson, and I truly believe that. You know, I mean, having just come through Deontay Wilder 3 times, you know, and then you get asked to fight someone like Dillian Whyte. Other than it being heavyweight boxing, everyone's got a puncher's chance. It's a pretty easy fight to take, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, I've always said the only man to beat Tyson is himself. And I think this is just a perfect homecoming for him. I believe he ends the fight whenever he wants to end the fight. I believe the fight goes exactly how Tyson wants it to go. However he wants that fight to go, it'll go. Because I just think the golfing class is too much. And I think, you know, quite a lot of people out there can agree with that. You know, you've got a guy who's going down as, you know, an all-time great versus like someone who's not really, you know, he's achieved, you know, good things in his career, but, you know, you can understand what I'm saying with the golfing class, like, you know what I mean, without saying it.
So what would you do if you were Dillian Whyte fighting Tyson? How would Dillian have a chance?
Here's exactly my mindset and what I do in this fight. I think to myself, right, I'm getting life-changing money. I'll probably never see this money ever again. I'll never get a shot like this ever again. It's Wembley, it's 100,000. Go out in the ring and lay it all on the line and put everything I can into it. And then that way, when the fight's over, if I've been knocked out or get chinned or lose on points, I can say, do you know what, I've done everything I can there. Sail off into the sunset, and that's that. And if he wants to keep boxing, keep boxing. And if he doesn't, he doesn't.
I think that's what you will get from Dillian Whyte, no matter who he's fighting. We all know he lives the life, he trains like an animal. He's going to come and bring the fight, but I think he's a, you know, he's where he should be an underdog, but I think he's a live underdog. He's got one of the best left hooks in the heavyweight division, in my opinion, Dillian Whyte. The way he throws that left hook short, like a bit of a clubbing left hook. He's got a long reach, really long arms. So I know Tyson's got the longest reach in the division, but Dillian's probably going to make up for his lack of height with his own reach, and he's got a good solid jab. It's going to be interesting because I think Dillian's took away the ruggedness he had when it was earlier on in his career. When he fought AJ in them type of fights, he was just a rugged fighter, throwing elbows in, coming in with the head and that a lot of the time. He can't do that against Tyson Fury because, in my opinion, Tyson Fury has got dirty fighting off to a T, and I don't think you can teach that. So he's not going to be able to bully Fury, and he's going to have to box him at long range, and I just think if he's doing that, it's a Tyson Fury fight all night long.
All right, then let's talk about the wider heavyweight division. April 23rd is the big one that we're here for, but in the future, we hopefully have Anthony Joshua versus Usyk, the rematch after Usyk beat AJ recently. Now, Usyk obviously is not even going to be thinking about this fight at the moment. I know there's been talk of him going into camp in 4 weeks, and obviously there's way bigger things going on for Usyk at the moment in Ukraine. But if we talk about Anthony Joshua for a moment, he's looked for new trainers, he's looked for new methods, he's looked for a new way to win. Can he change enough to change the result?
I mean, that's a great question. And, you know, when great fighters have lost in the past, have they always thought that the solution to a problem lies with another coach? I think it's a really interesting thing that's going on with Joshua behind the scenes at the moment. And I do think it's important, obviously, to address the Usyk thing because it kind of puts everything into perspective, doesn't it? You know, it really does in terms of us being here discussing heavyweight boxing. And obviously, you couldn't have any more respect for Usyk doing what he's doing now. It's just obviously, you know, with regards to Joshua, is he going to be fighting for a long period of time, or is he not going to be fighting for a long period of time, should I say? Because, you know, there's no telling when everything's, you know, going to be resolved. So it's a huge question mark. And we kind of thought when Dillian was delayed putting pen to paper on this contract and took it to the last possible moment, we kind of assumed and took it for granted that all the rest of the pieces of the heavyweight puzzle would slot into place. And, you know, kind of that piece is fitted, but now obviously everything else is all over the show, and it's obviously through no one's fault in boxing. And I mean, in answer to your question, it maybe gives Joshua a bit more time to spend with his new coach if that's the way that he goes and prepares for Usyk, who's obviously not going to have his mind on the job now and not going to be training, and, you know, and is doing what he's doing. Hard to answer the question, but I think, you know, Joshua was with one of the good minds in British boxing and in boxing worldwide with Rob McCracken, and you know I'm not sure that Rob wouldn't have had the answers for Usyk in a rematch, but you know Joshua will do what he chooses to do, and hopefully, obviously, we can get that fight and everything be resolved sooner rather than later.
Tactically, it was really wrong, and everybody could see it. So I don't know who's. I think there's always been a criticism towards Anthony Joshua. There's too many voices in the corner and too many, I suppose, hanger-oners or whatever you want to call them. But it never seems like there's one voice that he's listening to and one coach, which I always think is important. It's okay to take little bits of opinions and wisdom from other people, but there needs to be one definitive plan. And whoever came up with a game plan in the last fight to try and outbox the master boxer in Usyk, it's just baffling to me.
To Joshua's credit, he seems to be very hungry for knowledge, doesn't he? So he's always looking for advice and always looking for different people to pick their brains and all the rest of it. But like you said, ultimately it's got to come down to one voice. You can't just take necessarily bits from different people and try and thread it all together to create, you know, a winning game plan. It's got, you know, you need to be clear and concise about what you're trying to achieve in the ring on the night. Yeah,
and I think it's also down to the fighter on the night of keeping the discipline to stick to what's in your head. Now, I know we tried to outbox Usyk, but that may not have been the plan for the whole of the fight, because I just thought Usyk stunned him early enough to get his respect, and it might have just made him think twice about trying to hustle and, you know, bustle in and get them short, heavy shots off that heavy artillery throws up close. But on the outside looking in, it was like, why are you trying to outbox the master boxer? It was like, is it an ego thing? You want to prove you're the best boxer in the world, pound for pound. The thing is, with getting the new trainer, it's going back to what I was saying about Tyson Fury being able to fight dirty. I think Oleksandr Usyk, Anthony Joshua, yourself, Carl, me, yourself, maybe not so much yourself because of your dad and your family, the way you train. We're classically trained textbook boxers from the Olympic School of Boxing. I think Oleksandr Usyk can beat anyone who's trained in that capacity, and that's Anthony Joshua. You know, he's had it drilled into him year after year after year. It's textbook boxing. I think it's going to take someone with more dimensions than that to beat Oleksandr Usyk, if you know what I mean. Just a little bit different, something a bit different from what he is going to expect, and that's why I just think, even if he does train now, he's still going to struggle.
Not that he's an old dog, but you know, is this a situation you can't teach an old dog new tricks? He's probably the youngest person ever to be called an old dog, Anthony Joshua. But do you think that he's sort of met his match there? I
believe the solution doesn't lie with a new trainer. I don't believe it lies with anyone. I think if all Joshua needed to do, in my opinion, to win that fight, and in, you know, our whole team's opinion to win that fight, is, you know, Usyk's obviously a cruiserweight. He's coming up from cruiserweight. He's a smaller man. He's not a gigantic man. You're a 6'6" dinosaur, 18.5 stone, whatever. Get your hands up around your face. Go forward and bulldoze him.
Be a brute, yeah.
That's all he had to do to win that fight.
That, yeah.
And I believe if he did do that, he would have won. And in this second fight, if Joshua doesn't need new trainers and all this sort of stuff, get your hands up around your face and use your tactics. You're not a boxer. He's not a boxer. He's a powerhouse. Go forward and try and get him out of there. And I do believe 6, 7, 8 rounds down the way, if Joshua's got the gas tank for that, I don't really know. I do believe Usyk will start feeling it. I do believe he'll get Usyk out of there late on if he applies them tactics. He doesn't need to try and do all these things. He needs to go forward and put it on him, because he's the bigger man, he's the heavier man, he's the stronger man. So use your attributes and just go forward. And there's no need for new trainers or any of that. Just have the balls, you know, and just get straight into him. That's all he has to do to win that fight, in my opinion.
Tris, you mentioned like the thirst for knowledge, but can that almost manifest itself as a bit of an identity crisis? Tommy's talking about getting your hands up and doing what he's best at.
Obviously, doing it
with
clever.
tactics,
I'm
with
saying
tactics,
you can't
right?
Put your hands up and walk to the man because you'll get KO'd. But you know, apply the pressure smartly. You know, in that sort of sense.
Well, I think you're right, and I think, you know, we've seen different versions of Joshua in different fights. You know, against Pulev, he was sort of more jabbing and moving and offensive with counters, and then we've also seen him go and try and have it out with fighters in exciting fights. So, and I think that there might be a bit of an identity crisis in there in terms of him not knowing really where he's at as a fighter. And I think, you know, part of what he's looking for, I think, is that identity. And, you know, what is he? Is he a big upright, stand-up, classically styled textbook guy? or is he going to develop into something, you know, where there's a bit more finesse and maybe a bit more of an American influence, where you're more comfortable in close and working under pressure, or applying more pressure, you know, in terms of getting in closer? I think that's a great question. I think that's something that he is wanting to find out. That's certainly how it comes across in interviews. Like, you know, he kind of wants to find what he is as a fighter, and I'm not sure that his evolution has allowed him to discover that just yet.
I think it was really interesting when it was a few fights ago when he brought Angel Fernandez into his team, who's typically like a Cuban style, Mexican, South American type style of fighting, and wasn't sure if it was going to suit AJ or not, but it was. I suppose we're talking about him almost being a little bit confused as to what style he actually is, and I think he knows deep down now what style beats Usyk, and he has to apply that. I think all the boys touched on it here, that I don't even know if it's about changing trainers, but having one voice that you can listen to is very, very important. He knows what he has to do to win the fight, but whether or not he can do it, that's a different thing.
Was the second loss more damaging than the first? Because the first can happen, right? The second suggests that there's something wrong. And from your experience, did your losses affect you in different ways?
Yeah, the first one really hurt. The first one was a rematch, so my loss, I'd already beaten Santa Cruz the first fight. I lost the next time. And it was your first defeat of your career, and you sense things changing a little bit, and we bit of a cliche with the phone stops ringing and stuff. As much as it happened to me, so it was hard to get over that, really. The Warrington fight, again, that was a loss that hurt me bad, because I felt like I really got it wrong, and although Josh, I lost the fight, I felt like it was down to my own performance rather than anything else, really. And then the last loss just finished my career, but I knew that was always going to be it. If I lost one more time, I was packing it in. So they all affected me different ways, I suppose, a little bit, but they all hurt.
Have you seen a way that he's reacted to that second loss that was different from the first one? I think the first time he was very much sort of open to facing it and trying to kind of be fine with it.
Yeah.
But I guess sometimes it's not easy to actually be that way inside.
Yeah, well, it hurt him massively, didn't it? But the same as this situation, he had the chance to right the wrong straight away, and that's like, you know, a relief as a fighter. But actually going and doing it's a different thing. So he's done it with Ruiz, and he's done the boxing, the classic stand-up boxing, brilliantly, stood Ruiz on his head. But after the first fight, for my own experience, it's like, okay, I've lost, you know. It's one loss. It was a bit of a, you know, it can happen. I've had a bad day at the office, but when you're having more than one bad day at the office, that's when you do start asking more questions. And I think he is muddying the waters a little bit by trying to find the answer when he's probably already got the answer himself to at least do better against Usyk. I just don't think style-wise he's going to beat Usyk. So I don't want to say he's got the answer to beat him. I just think to make it a bit of a closer fight, a bit of a harder night for Usyk. But I just think the second fight he seems to have a little bit more anger about it. He took it a little bit more seriously in the months after it. You know, he just seems to have a bit between the teeth.
I think the difference between the losses were with Andy Ruiz when he suffered that defeat. I think people saw that as a bit of a Lennox Lewis, Hassie Rackman, or Lennox Lewis, Oliver McCall blip. And then it was almost like, look, let's get them back together and we'll right the wrong. And with Usyk, I think, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if the bookmakers have Joshua as the underdog going into the rematch. You know, against Ruiz, I think people were still thinking, oh, Joshua, you know, he'll get his head together and he'll put it right. Against Usyk, it's not such a foregone conclusion.
All right, then let's move on to a few of the other names in the heavyweight division. And we'll start with someone that, David, before you started recording, you said you were very excited by. Joyce, still undefeated, and his career is going from strength to strength. And despite having that Olympic training, he's anything but orthodox, isn't he?
Well, he's the exact type of fighter I'm looking at Usyk and thinking he'd give Usyk problems because he just does things unconventionally.
They fought in the amateurs, didn't they?
He fought in the amateurs over 5 rounds,
yeah.
And he pushed them all away. Now, he's in the right place at the right time now. He's ready to challenge. I think, is he going to challenge the winner of Usyk, Joshua? Is that right? Or
I think he's lined up in the mandatories, but I was going to come to Tommy in a moment because he's also been mentioned with Joseph Parker, which is it's another step up in terms of just the status and size of the fight, isn't it?
I just think he's going to be a difficult man to beat. You know, his size, his fitness, the pace he can fight at for a big man like that. I've never seen it before. But not only that, he seems to have a tough chin because he can be caught. He is open to be caught with shots, but he's taken every one so far. So I think he's exciting in it, but I think he will be avoided unless you really have to fight him.
Tommy, Tyson's obviously had Joe Joyce in a couple of his training camps. He's sparred with him a number of times. Have you ever seen anyone fight the way that Joe Joyce does?
No, never. I mean, you know, I can say myself, I think, you know, he's definitely going to be right there when Tyson's gone. You know, when all these guys have moved over, I definitely think he's. I know he's getting on himself. You know, I think he's 33, is he?
36, yeah. But he started, I guess, in the pros late.
It's tough to say, isn't it? I mean, at 36 years of age, fighting the way he does, you know, in heavyweight division, just keeps ploughing forward. I think that man can do 20 rounds straight off the bat and not get tired. You know, it's a very good tool to have, especially in the heavyweight division, because not a lot of heavyweights have got like that tank. He just throws a million punches, keeps coming. And that's why I do think myself he's a very, very difficult man to beat. But you know, if that fight gets made between Joe Parker and Joe Joyce, that'll definitely be one hell of a fight, because I know Joe Parker's been training down with us in Morecambe for quite a bit now. I think about a year. The improvements he's making, he's a different fighter. Like, I'm not just saying that you'll see it on fight night. I think you've seen glimpses of it, which was already the other day. But the stuff that he's doing in the gym is it's unbelievable. You know, he's got a lot faster, he's a lot sharper, his feet are a lot better. And I think you're just going to see Joe go from strength to strength, so it'll be a really great fight to watch.
How much has Joe changed since you know him? Because I think, to be fair, when he had the fight with Anthony Joshua, people maybe saw Joseph Parker as a bit of a kind of boring fighter. I think that's fair to say. But now we've seen him in different kinds of fights, and I don't know, what's been happening with him up there that you're seeing from him?
You know, I see everything in Joe. You know, Joe's the nicest man in the world. Honestly, you won't meet a nicer man than him. You wouldn't even say he was a boxer if you didn't know him. But the actual training aspect of it is just going from strength to strength, and you know, he's a new fighter now. He really is a new fighter, being under us, and he's just having that mindset of training alongside Tyson every single workout. You know, his mind sort of changed, and I definitely feel like, you know, he's definitely up there. I think if Joe Parker fought Dillian Whyte again, I think Joe Parker beats Dillian Whyte convincingly this time, because he's a much different fighter than then. You know, I'm excited to see Joe's fights from now on, training underneath us. You know, now Joe's eating right and everything like that, because, you know, off camera, should I say, the conversations that we've had, he might not have prepared the best way for them fights. But, you know, when he's down there in Morecambe beside Tyson, you know, Tyson don't stand no messing when he's training. There's no nothing, like you say, there's blackouts, he's gym home. And I think Joe Parker underneath that training regimen already is a different man. So I'm thinking, you know, fights to come, he's going to be a force.
Do you think this is a great fight for Joe Joyce? Or a great fight for both men, really? Because Joe Joyce, what he needs is big nights, right? He needs more big nights to build the name, build the brand, make himself one of the heavyweights that gets to have nights like this. And Joe Parker is a step up in name value again, isn't it?
Well, I suppose for Joe Parker, it's more high risk, low reward, isn't it? And that's what David was talking about in terms of getting the fights that Joe Joyce, you know, people are going to have to be forced to fight him because he's such a brute, isn't he? And it's not just fighting him, it's the type of fight you're going to have to beat him. You know, in terms you're going to have to work hard, you're going to have to throw a lot of punches, you're going to have to try and put a dent in that chin as well. So at this stage, there's probably more to gain for Joe Joyce than Joe Parker. But I agree with Tommy. I think the improvements in Joe Parker were clear to see from the Chisora fight, and it's exciting to see how he can progress. And I think the stuff that, you know, the one way that he can beat Joyce is to outbox him, and obviously that's what he's picking up in Morecambe. He's adding that side to his game.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think there's no better man to train with if you want to try and outbox someone in the heavyweight division than Tyson Fury. I think Andy Lee, who's involved in coaching, I don't know how, is Andy his number one coach now? Or?
Yeah, he is, yeah. I
know he's helping a lot, but the Furies are helping him as well, but I always thought that Andy Lee was going to play a pivotal role in the development of Joe. He was someone who, like, even from the amateurs, he's a real student of the game. I always expected him to be a top-class coach, and it looks like he's turning into that. But I think that teaming up with, if you want to get better, there's no wrong in teaming up with the best heavyweight on the planet at the minute, which is Tyson Fury. It'll be difficult at some point if there's potential fight between them. I don't know how that works, but
do you think they'd fight?
No. Joe and Tyson are more like brothers. I definitely don't think they'll fight. Definitely not.
But it's great, you know, these guys will help bring each other on. You know, obviously with Tyson with a date now in April and Joe looking to get out there sooner rather than later. These guys, when they're in training, they will be pushing each other each and every session. When they're out running, you know, Tyson will either be trying to get away from Joseph, or Joseph's going to be chasing him. It's going to be the same thing in the gym, same thing with their spars. They'll be able to drag an extra 2 or 3% out of each other each and every workout, and you know that's priceless at the end of a long training camp.
Yeah. I think Parker's the first fighter I've seen throw his name into the hat to fight Joe Joyce. I think they've had to go looking for opponents for Joe Joyce throughout. He's the first person who's come out and said, I want to fight Joe Joyce, so you must have know something, you know, believe that he's got the capabilities to do, because like Trish said, he's got a lot more to lose than, you know.
Even just, you know, in and out of the gym when we finish the session, just in the shower and that, he's actually saying, you know, I believe I can do this, I believe I can do that. Obviously, we all know Joe Joyce is no joke, is he? So, you know, I definitely believe Joe Parker has the beating of Joe Joyce, because he's up for that fight. It's definitely a fight that he wants.
Tell you what, that would be a very nice press conference as well. That's two very nice men in it.
Yeah. We're not pushing and shoving there.
Let's talk about a former opponent of Joe Joyce, Daniel Dubois, looking to fight Trevor Bryanson, I believe, for the WBA regular title. So getting back to the trajectory, perhaps, that we thought he was on before that Joe Joyce fight, he looks a happy man in his last couple of wins, would you say so?
Yeah, he does, and I think the pairing with Shane McGuigan has probably helped take him to another level. He's learning new things, and you can see him employing them. And I think, you know, the fight with Bryan's a good fight for him. You know, Bryan is, despite being the WBA world champion, he's no world beater, and it's a good fight for Daniel. The problem is, I suppose, if Daniel beats Bryan, then it's going to be a little bit where Anthony Joshua was, maybe when he beat Charles Martin, where he was still a work in progress. And you know, when you're a world champion, really you shouldn't be taking backward steps after that. You know, so if he does become WBA world champion, it's going to be full steam ahead. The good news for Dubois is obviously he's with BT in Queensbury, which means that should Tyson Fury come through the Dillian Whyte fight, there's a potential heavyweight unification fight there with Fury and Dubois, which is easy to make. I'm not saying that's going to be as big as a Fury Joshua fight, but in terms of easy to make and getting bums on seats in the UK, then that would do very well.
I think it's difficult for all the top guys though. You've got Tyson, you've got Dillian Whyte, who's going to be fighting. You've got AJ and Usyk, but all these guys bubbling under the surface, they're going to be waiting quite a while on their opportunities by the time it all gets sorted out at the top. And we know what's going on now with Usyk and Russia and Ukraine at the minute. And is that going to delay the AJ fight? Is that going to hold things up even more? I know it's trivial on the grand scheme of things, but the guys like Dubois and Joyce and Parker all bubbling under the surface, waiting for the go. They may have to wait a little bit longer.
I think it's just fair to say, if we just talk about heavyweights, in my opinion, I believe the name that I don't think we've mentioned yet is Deontay Wilder. You know, I think if he chooses to fight again, I think he's the second best heavyweight out there.
I agree.
Because I think he knocks them all out. Bar Tyson, you know, obviously as you've seen, Tyson come through him 3 times. I don't want to sound like Tyson, but facts speak for itself. Tyson's come through him 3 times. He's took his best shots. He's come through it. But as Tyson out the equation, all these other heavyweights, including Joe Joyce, in my opinion, I think Deontay Wilder gives him an extremely hard time.
Wilder Joshua's got to be one of the most fun fights out there.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that's what Wilder is fun, right? I think maybe the first Bermain-Stavern match was a little bit difficult, but other than that, every single one of them has been exciting.
He's always exciting because he's got that punch that can take you out. And I was ringside when he fought Luis Ortiz and didn't win a second of any round until he knocked him out. But that's the explosiveness of heavyweight fighting, and
we talked about characters.
Yeah.
We talked about characters as well, and he's certainly that as well. But then there's other heavyweights, like you say, in terms of bubbling under the surface. You've got Hrgovic, you've got Tony Yoka. And Yoka was obviously Joe Joyce's opponent in the Olympics. So you've got a whole plethora of guys that could make good, exciting fights. Yeah. So it's not a bad division at the minute.
I do absolutely no harm for any of them to, like Carl's saying, they're going to be waiting a long time. Do no harm at all to make some fights amongst them.
Yeah.
Like Joyce and Dubois, they put it on the line and said, look, it's early in our careers, let's do it anyway. Done Dubois no harm. He's fighting the WA title. He's bounced back brilliantly. They're all young,
They can still earn a lot fighting each other as well.
Well, your Olympic teammate with James DeGale, and he fought George Groves early doors, didn't he? Didn't stop.
Neither of them any hands, did they?
Exactly.
No, they both went on to world titles. So I think they can take a leaf out of that. I think it's important for the sport as well and the fans that quality fights are continue to be made amongst the top 10 contenders.
I think what you said there, Dubois, it's not really done him in the long run any harm. Maybe the day after we thought it might have done, but you look back at it with a little bit of hindsight, you think, no, actually, people applaud the bravery of taking these fights. And if you keep fighting the best, you might lose every now and again, but people are more interested, and it's good for the sport, right? So a fight like Joe Joyce against Joe Parker, you think, okay, well, this gets the ball rolling a little bit with these big fights happening. And yeah, Wilder versus anyone that we've mentioned today, I'd be watching. Yeah,
and it goes to show that a loss isn't the end of the world. And I keep having to say that because people are so precious about undefeated records in this modern era. But if Joe Joyce, for example, lost to Joseph Parker, he can come again. Look, we're talking about Wilder, and see how all our ears pricked up when Tommy said Deontay Wilder. Like we want to see him again. We want to see him fight. And just because he's lost couple of fights doesn't mean that he's not entertaining or exciting and can't still put bums on seat and can't beat very good fighters just because he's taken some losses. It's important these guys, not necessarily put pride on the back burner, but put the undefeated record on the back burner and make the fights.
Yeah. Is it almost like boxing doesn't tell these people enough that it doesn't matter if you lose one or two times?
Yeah. Just because you're not the very best in any sport doesn't mean you have to stop. You can still be a solid competitor. You can still entertain fans, which is what it's about at the end of the day. There's a fight recently. I can't remember it off the top of my head. But if the big names and we know who they are and they fight each other, doesn't have. Well, sorry, Kell Brook for me, can. Let's look at Kell Brook for me. No title on the line. No title on the line. But because of the needle, because we know who they are, the quality they've been, and even those at the end of their careers. And they've done massive numbers because we all wanted to watch it. And come fight week, people were pretending they weren't that interested, but then come fight week, they went and got that remote and clicked the buy button.
I think an issue is though the promoters can use a loss as leverage to pay someone less when it can be a really exciting fight. Like look at Conor and Brook. I don't know how much they made, but the reports you're reading, it's massive money for two guys really at the end of their career in a non-title fight. So although Parker and Joyce is an amazing fight, and we can all sit around here and say a loss doesn't mean anything, they can move on. It'll affect them, and that's the reality of it. It will affect them. It shouldn't, but of course it does affect their career and potentially their future earnings.
But then obviously it's a little bit how the promoter plays the game as well, because look at Dubois lost to Joe Joyce, and now he's Gonna beat Joyce, it looks like, in a race to a world title fight. Yeah. So a lot of it's the responsibility of the promoter. If these guys lose on your watch, to bring them back and help rebuild them. Or
of course you've got the case of Derek Chisora. Yeah. Doesn't matter how many he loses because everyone knows he's an entertainer and everyone knows he's brave, and ultimately that seems to be a higher currency than sometimes someone's win-loss record, right?
Yeah, and he's got a lot of fanfare at the minute. Derek, he's always in exciting fights. He always gives a good account of himself, although he's at the very top end, he's always come up short. But he's always in the fights. I think an important topic, Tris, is a book out at the minute, and I've been tweeting and I'm putting a lot on my story at the minute, Damage, and it's about CTE and brain injury and brain trauma as you go on as a fighter. And that's something, if you're close to Derek Chisora, you'd be worried about, and you'd be suggesting maybe, although you're an exciting fighter, although you're still earning big bucks, is it worth it?
Do you need to go? It's tough, isn't it? Because how do you tell a fighter who is still one of the best in the UK and still probably well rated that it's time to go? That's the tough part, isn't it? Because obviously we do know through the concussion crisis, through NFL, and through the stuff that's happening with football and the Jeff Astle Foundation, and the links with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, we do know about the existence of head trauma and the effect it has on people down the line. But how do you tell a fighter who is still capable of beating so many good, worthy opponents that, sorry, you can't fight anymore? It's tough, isn't it? Really, it's a tough situation. I mean, obviously, you were you went out on your own terms.
I did, yeah, but there's two, in my opinion, there's two different schools of thought about taking punishments in boxing when it comes to either being knocked out or having a resilient chin like Derek Chisora has, and that's when it's more difficult to tell someone, because for me, I think I got knocked out twice in my career. As a few, other stoppages on my feet or whatever, but I had that vulnerability where, I didn't really want that to be happening that many more. Getting chins on telly, family seeing it. It's not nice. It doesn't really happen to Derek. He got it against Dillian. He knocked out. But apart from that, like Carl said, he's in the fight. He's pushing them to the very end, and he's always in with the shout, and that's when it's going to be more difficult. He'd be like, well, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't get knocked out. I'll take it to points. But the last fight against Parker, it looked like he got hurt a little bit more than in previous fights, and he went down a couple of times. So that might be a sign that it's just starting to wilt a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, one fight that was talked about, which personally I wouldn't want to see, is Chisora against Deontay Wilder. There's very little to gain for me when you want to test someone's power against someone's iron chin. That's not necessarily a great reason for a matchup. Is see how much this guy can take. That's not. It's barely sport.
Dangerous then, isn't it? Really, that fight should never be made, because you got someone there who can do some serious damage, and when you've had a few miles on the clock already, let's just say, you don't really need that, do you? I mean,
what's your take on it? Like, being a younger fighter who's coming through, what's your take on people like Derek, guys who have, really paid their dues over and over and have given the fans a lot to cheer? You'd like to think that they're financially secure and can walk off into the sunset and think that's that. Yeah,
I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and say, he should retire. I mean, if you ask me, I'd say, yeah, 100%. I think Derek Chisora should retire. He's got nothing else to prove. We all know what he is. He always gives a good account of himself. He's always been in good fights. He's boxed for the titles. There's nothing else left for him to prove other than boxing for money. But really, is a bit of paper worth your health? But again, it's easy for me to say, oh, Derek Chisora should retire. This is the man's life. You know what I mean? Boxing is his life. And I'm not about to say, someone should do that and someone should do this. It's their life and it's their decision to make. But from my opinion, yeah, I mean, like Khan and Brooke, I think both of them should retire. They've got nothing else left to prove.
But I do get it as well. You're a long time retired, and there's very little opportunity out there to make the money he can make by just having a training camp and a fight, because the work's done in camp. That's where you earn your money as well. So I can get it why fighters, especially like Derek, if he fights Wilder, you're talking $1 million plus, aren't you? Purse at least. So it's not like he's just getting offered pennies to fight again and he wants to continue, like Paul Danny Williams fighting still, something like that. I can see the temptation and the attraction, and although Deontay Wilder's a dangerous puncher, this sounds a bit sick, if anything, but it might be better getting knocked out off a one-punch knockout than taking a sustained beating over 12 rounds like he did against Joseph Parker. And if he's going to fight anyone and get paid for it, he might think, well, I may as well fight and get paid a hell of a lot of money rather than just, because we're all heavyweights. Just the damage can be done off any heavyweight. It's more likely to be concussive against Deontay Wilder.
Mm-hmm. All right then, it's an important subject and we could talk about it all day, but I'm going to move on. Just lastly, before we finish up, we've spoken about those fights kind of bubbling underneath the very top level. We've already got Fury Whyte. We hopefully will get AJ Usyk at some point. At some point. If you could make one fight underneath those two, what would it be? Who's feeling brave and going first?
Not me.
You're going to copy everyone's homework.
I mean, so one of, and I know you've just taken out to one of the main players, but I mean, in terms of a fun fight, Joshua Wilder for me is right up there, and I know that obviously we've got to take Joshua out of the equation. But maybe that fight, if Usyk is out of the equation for a bit, maybe that is a fight that will come up. But in terms of a fun fight, maybe Joyce against Wilder
Yeah.
You know, because Wilder's not Sugar Ray Leonard, is he? He's obviously a big, explosive puncher, but he doesn't necessarily have the greatest work rate. Joyce can make him work and stuff. So I think that's interesting.
I've got it's just came to me actually. It's another guy who we haven't mentioned, but Andy Ruiz was a world champion not that long ago. I think that although, without contradicting myself, I don't think Derek Chisora should fight again. But if he did, a fight with him and Andy Ruiz, I think is a cracking fight.
Yeah,
you're a sick man.
It is gel fantastic, wasn't it? The fact that Tommy mentioned before, none of us mentioned Deontay Wilder. Now he's on all our lips because we're talking about the most exciting fights, and I think it's been spoken about, isn't it, Wilder, Andy Ruiz. So I think that'll be an interesting one. Again, the fast hands of Andy Ruiz, or up close, compact fighter against Deontay Wilder's explosive power, and you know, his fighting style, like Tris saying, he's not textbook boxer the best. He's wild by nature, and that's just what makes for the excitement in his fight. So I think that'll be a good one to get over the line.
All right, Tommy, it's you now. All the pressure. You've gone last.
I mean, it's probably not, you know, the answer to say, but the only fight that springs to mind for me, realistically, out there that I want to see, other than the guys, you know, you've mentioned, is probably just Tyson and Joshua. You know, I think that's, you know, even though Joshua has lost, you know, like twice or whatever he's lost at, you know, I'd like to see Tyson have this fight with Whyte, you know, and then, you know, the winner of Usyk and whatnot, whatever happens, I just want to see, you know, that fight, you know, not purely for the fight, because I'm not going to be biased and you all know what I'm going to say, so I'm not even going to bother saying it. Just for the fans.
Still the biggest thing.
I think that's one for the fans. You know, I think this place gets sold at 100,000 easy when them two come together. I think it's a good, you know, here you go, fans fight. You know, regardless of the outcome, I think it's a good one for the fans. At the end of the day, without the fans in boxing, we're out of a job. So I think that is still the biggest fight out there. You know, for UK fans, that's the biggest fight out there. London, Manchester coming together, Wembley. I don't think it gets any bigger, really.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that one. But before then, of course, we have Tyson Fury versus Dillian Whyte, and it'll be right here at Wembley Stadium on April the 23rd on BT Sport Box Office, and I think we're all looking forward to it.